You're ready.
Okay. Real quick, went to the University of Florida, graduated with a news editorial degree. My first newspaper, I was a sports editor at a small town over in West Florida that's about 25 years behind us. Within 6 months, I was managing editor of that newspaper, a daily newspaper, fresh out of college. And the first investigative story I did resulted in the first public employee ever to lose his job in this state for sexual harassment. I thought that was pretty good. I also did a story on the sheriff there, and actually got to listen to a tape that an undercover officer from out of town made when she came and pretended to apply for a job interview. I could actually hear the sheriff unzip his pants in that interview. Okay. The reason I bring this up is because government, by and large, is run by men and women who are not any brighter than we are. They're not any more honest than we are. And yet they do one thing that we don't do, and that's they decide how to spend our tax money. How many of you are Clay County residents? Who's got a $20 bill? Okay. Now, yes, she did. I set her up to prove the point. This $20 bill that I just took from her, if it was tax money, I would take 81 more of these. And I'd take the same from you, and you, and you, and you. And that's only for your smallest government, Clay County government. $1,600 from every Clay County resident. Now, how many Clay County residents think they get $1,600 worth of service out of their government? A month? No, a year. $1,600 a year. That's what? Quick math? $1,200 a month, something like that. No, $1,400 a month, something along those lines. $140 a month, I'm sorry. From every one of you. How many of you have ever been to a government meeting? How many of you have ever watched it on TV? You know what they do with your money? They take this from you and they buy ads in golf magazines to advertise private golf courses in this county. They spend your money to advertise hotels. They spend your money to pay for people who are too lazy to work. They spend your money on a lot of stuff. And if you don't pay attention, then they're going to spend more of it. They don't ask you for this money. They reach into your paycheck and rip it out before you ever get a hold of it. Now, it's even worse for the federal government. The federal government now has interest on the national debt that exceeds our gross national product. You know what that means? That means that every penny this economy generates this year will not pay the interest on our debt. Now, let me ask you, why is the First Amendment the First Amendment? Anybody got any theories?
Most important.
Why?
Because it's
I agree with you so far.
our freedoms that we are given.
Yeah, what it does is the First Amendment allows somebody who owns a newspaper to let you know when the government takes away your Second Amendment and your Third Amendment and your Fourth Amendment. I've been a managing editor of newspapers, daily newspapers, for more than 20 years. I am on, I would guess, 200 to 300 politicians' poop lists. And they've got my name written in ink, so it's not erasable. Now, the reason they do that is because they don't like what I did for a living. They don't like me shining a light on what they're doing with your $1,600. Now, investigative journalism has one role that is more important than anything else it does, and that is to spy on your government for you. And it's because government is inefficient, it is wasteful, and it can take things away from you. It can only do that in the dark, though. Now, investigative journalists, is anybody here old enough to know what Watergate is? Ah! Wow, that's 3 classes, your first hand that's been raised. Watergate was a hotel in Washington, D.C. where the Democratic National Headquarters was. During the campaign year, Richard Nixon, who was president, had some guys break into it and cover it up and all that. And that's why Richard Nixon had to resign from the presidency. The heroes of that story were 2 guys nobody had ever heard of before that. 2 young reporters who worked their butts off and dug and dug and dug. Investigative journalism is difficult, but that's the only way to get the information. So there's always going to be an adversarial role between journalism and government. It was set up that way in the Constitution. That's why the First Amendment's the first, so that you have a chance to keep an eye on your government. Now, let me give you a word of caution. Nobody's reading newspapers anymore. They're closing all over the country. The ones that aren't closing are in trouble financially. I don't know where the industry's going, but I do know that whenever the light gets shined on government, it doesn't do any good if regular people don't pay attention. The press can't force Washington, D.C. to do anything. But you can. You do all the time. One at a time, in large groups. It's you. You have to pay attention. You have to watch. What's the root word of government? Govern. You know what that means? That means somebody's setting rules for you to live by. Personally, I don't like that arrangement at all. That's part of why I had my aborted run at office last year, until I found out I didn't like the other side of it either. So I stay in the middle and just bitch at everybody now. So, bitch at you guys for not paying attention, for not making your government responsive, especially locally, where it's neighbors of yours that are spending your $296 million. By the way, that's only for county government. The school board is spending $280. I think the budget this year is $280. So they're getting 79 or 78 of those $20 bills of yours instead of 80. That's all that money is being ripped out of your pocket. It's being stolen and spent, and you guys have to get mad at it. What would you do with $1,600? If I handed you all 81 of your $20 bills and said, here, from your government. No, I don't trust you, correct? What would you do with $1,600?
Fix my car.
Anybody else? Got $1,600 worth of fun stuff? I know what I'd do. Panama City for the weekend. Okay. But that's my role in journalism, was to offer you a chance to affect changes in your government by knowing what it's doing. Now, it's just like Tom standing up in front of this class. He's got all this knowledge. He's going to offer it to you. You can either pay attention to him or not. Now, if you don't pay attention, you're not going to know much about federal government when you leave the class. If you do pay attention, you will. It's the same thing with government, except he's not taking your money. Your government is. And that's what it all boils down to, is money. They're taking what's yours, and you're just saying, here, take it, I'll give you more next year. You're not saying, can you take 70 of these instead of 80?